What if the first thing your soul sees after death isn't light, but your darkest truth staring directly back at you? Not a tunnel, not angels, but something older, something you've carried your whole life, yet never dared to meet. Carl Jung once described a chilling near-death experience that defied every religious story we've been told. In that moment on the edge of life, he didn't encounter heaven or hell. He encountered an archetype, a force so ancient and deeply embedded in the human psyche that it felt less like a being and more like a mirror to his unconscious soul. It wasn't a comforting guide. It wasn't a loved one. It was a presence, a symbolic figure reflecting all the parts of himself he had hidden, denied, or never fully integrated. Jung believed that after death, we don't escape who we are. We descend directly into the depths of our unconscious. And there, the archetypes, the symbolic forces within the psyche, don't just appear. They become the very terrain of the afterlife itself. That's the terrifying beauty of Jung's vision. The soul's journey doesn't begin with peace. It begins with confrontation. So let me ask you, if you were to die tonight, are you ready to face the part of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding? In this video, we're going to explore the archetype Jung encountered, what it represents, why it's feared across cultures and myths, and most importantly, why Jung believed most of us are completely unprepared for what awaits us beyond the veil. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's a wake-up call. Because the real question isn't what happens after we die. The real question is, who will you meet there? Have you ever wondered what truly waits for us after death? Most people expect to see something divine, a light, a figure of God, or a heavenly being. But for Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, the experience was far from religious. It was deeply psychological, and perhaps even more spiritual than we realize. In his near-death experience in 1944, Carl Jung didn't encounter God. What he met were two ancient forces that he had studied for decades, but never imagined he would feel so intimately. He encountered the wise old man and the shadow, two of the most powerful archetypes from the collective unconscious. Let's pause for a second. What exactly is an archetype? To Jung, archetypes are not just symbols. They're universal patterns of thought and behavior, deep psychological imprints that live within the collective unconscious of every human being. They shape how we dream, how we fear, how we hope. And they're older than culture, older than language, older than memory. You've seen them before, even if you didn't realize it. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the shadow. They appear in mythology, religion, fairy tales, and yes, in your own inner world. They're not fictional, they're foundational, and Jung believed that these archetypes are part of what makes us human. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. During that near-death episode, Jung realized something profound. And these archetypes don't just guide our lives. They also wait for us on the other side. Instead of pearly gates or a divine throne, what Jung felt was the overwhelming presence of two forces, the wise old man, representing timeless wisdom, truth, and spiritual guidance, and the shadow, the dark mirror of everything we repress and refuse to see in ourselves. He didn't see them as physical beings. There were no robes, no beards, no thunderous voices. Instead, they came as fields of energy, vast, sentient, wordless. Not images you could describe, but sensations so intense, so real they bypassed logic and overwhelmed the soul. It was as if Jung was not just observing these forces, he was inside them. Or perhaps they were already inside him. This changes everything we think we know about death. Because what if the afterlife is not about reward or punishment, but about reunion with the deepest parts of our psyche? What if it's not heaven or hell we meet, but the unconscious mind in its purest form? Think about it. If archetypes shape our entire inner world in life, why would they vanish at death? Jung's experience suggests that the journey of the soul continues not by escaping the psyche, but by confronting it more directly than ever before. Let's take a closer look at these two archetypes, because they weren't random. They hold a key to understanding your own psychological and spiritual destiny. The wise old man. You might recognize this archetype in stories: the wizard, the monk, the sagely grandfather. He's Gandalf, Dumbledore, or Yoda. But more than a trope, he represents the part of you that knows. The inner voice that whispers truth when you're lost. The deep intuition that rises in stillness. For Jung, encountering this force was like touching the eternal source of meaning. He didn't just see wisdom, he became it. And in that moment, he felt both humbled and whole. But the wise old man does not come without his counterpart. The shadow. This is the part we all avoid. The anger we suppress, the jealousy we deny, the trauma we hide, the parts of ourselves we've locked away in the basement of our psyche, hoping no one will notice, not even ourselves. But the shadow always notices. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In his near-death state, the shadow wasn't frightening in the way horror movies portray it. It was honest, raw, unfiltered truth. And that's why it felt terrifying, because it forced him to confront every part of himself he had not fully accepted. He described the experience as standing in front of something that knew him better than he knew himself. But here's the twist: the shadow was not there to judge him. It was there to complete him. Because Jung understood that spiritual wholeness doesn't come from rejecting darkness, it comes from integrating it, from embracing both the light and the dark within us. So what does this mean for us, those still living, still seeking? It means that death is not an escape, it's an encounter. A psychological reckoning, a moment of soul recognition where everything we've denied is returned to us, not to punish, but to unify. And maybe, just maybe, the real work begins before we die. What if the purpose of life is not to climb a ladder to heaven, but to descend into the depths of our own psyche and bring light to the darkest corners? That's what Jung believed, that the path to the soul is through the unconscious, not away from it. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like there's a wise voice inside you quietly guiding you, but you've ignored it? Have you ever felt the discomfort of your own shadow rising through fear, shame, or projection? Do you dare face those parts of yourself before you meet them again after death? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're deeply practical. Because your ability to recognize the archetypes within you may be the very thing that prepares your soul for what comes next. In Jung's final years, he became obsessed with a spiritual truth few dared to speak. He believed that what you refuse to face in life will become your greatest teacher in death. And in the next part of this video, we'll dive into that chilling and enlightening idea: what happens to the soul that rejects its shadow, why some get lost in the unconscious after death, and how you can awaken now to avoid that fate. So don't go anywhere. Your soul may already be whispering, "Are you listening?" What if I told you that the scariest thing you'll ever face after death isn't judgment from a god, or flames, or punishment? What if it's something far more intimate, something that's already inside you? Right now, Carl Jung called it the shadow, and according to him, It's the most powerful and terrifying force the soul will encounter in the afterlife. Not because it's evil, but because it's true. Let's unpack this. The shadow, in Jung's words, is everything within you that you've tried to reject, hide, or forget. It's the parts of yourself that were exiled from your conscious mind because they were too painful, too dark, or too shameful to face. It's your buried fears, your unspoken jealousy, the rage you never admitted, the wounds you pretend don't hurt anymore, the desires you were told to suppress, and all the guilt and grief and fear that never had a name. The shadow is the you that you tried to leave behind. But here's the thing, the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. And Jung warned us after death, when the ego dissolves, you no longer have the tools to suppress or rationalize what you repressed in life. There's no more pretending, no more filters, no more masks. And that's when the shadow rises fully and completely. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a nightmare where something was chasing you, but you never saw its face? Or stood in front of a mirror in a dream, only to find your reflection gone? Have you ever woken up shaken, sweating, unable to explain the deep emotional weight of something that didn't even happen? These are glimpses of the shadow trying to reach you through symbols, images, dreams. And Jung believed that if we ignore it in life, we are destined to meet it in death in a way that could trap the soul in cycles of suffering and illusion. He described it like this. A person who in life constantly feared failure might find themselves after death in a loop of reliving images of collapse, shame, and rejection. Not because they're being punished, but because their psyche is playing out the energy it never resolved. Someone who was arrogant, who always needed recognition and superiority, may be surrounded by haunting visions of being invisible, ignored, or forgotten. Again, not out of cruelty, but out of unintegrated truth. The shadow doesn't torment us, it reveals us. And if we haven't done the work of integration while alive, these unconscious patterns can become emotional prisons on the other side. Let's pause here. This may sound abstract, but Jung gave us powerful imagery to understand what these shadow confrontations might look like. He spoke of people dreaming of being endlessly chased by a faceless figure, broken mirrors reflecting nothing back, a silent creature watching from the dark corners, a version of themselves distorted, screaming, or empty. These aren't just horror scenes. These are metaphors for disconnection from the self. Because what's scarier than a monster not recognizing yourself? And according to Jung, many souls, when met with the full force of the shadow after death, freeze. They can't integrate. They can't accept what they see. And so they get caught in a liminal space, a psychological limbo, a state where suffering isn't fire and brimstone, it's meaninglessness. Illusions, repetition, emotional echoes that never resolve. But here's the good news, and it's what makes Jung's work so powerful. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your doorway to wholeness. It only becomes a nightmare when we refuse to see it, when we deny its presence. So now I ask you, what parts of yourself have you pushed away? What feelings scare you so much you pretend they're not there? What truth would you rather avoid than feel? Because those are the exact truths you'll meet again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly when the ego falls away and all that's left is your naked, unfiltered soul. And when that moment comes, will you run from your reflection, or will you embrace it? In the next section of this video, we'll explore Jung's vision of what freedom after death really means. Not escape, not salvation, but reunion. A return to the self, all of it. Because if you can face your shadow with compassion, you don't just survive the afterlife, you awaken in it. So stay with me, because what comes next may be the most beautiful truth you've never heard. If you knew that one day on the edge of death, you would come face to face with the most honest, raw, and hidden parts of yourself, would you start preparing today? Carl Jung believed that we don't wait until death to meet the soul, we build the capacity for it now. He called this lifelong journey the process of individuation, the sacred task of becoming whole. And the truth is, most people avoid this work until it's too late. But you don't have to. So what exactly is individuation? In simple terms, individuation is the process of integrating everything inside you, the light and the dark, the conscious and the unconscious, the accepted and the rejected. It's the path of becoming fully yourself. And if you've been following this series, you already know that the shadow, the most terrifying archetype we encounter after death, only haunts us when it's been denied. So how do we prepare to meet that archetype now, while we're still alive, still lucid, still capable of healing? Here are 5 powerful ways to begin this inner journey. You can't confront what you refuse to name. The first step is to recognize the emotional energies you've buried. Ask yourself honestly, what feelings make me uncomfortable? What traits do I criticize in others but secretly fear in myself? When do I act out of fear, shame, or insecurity instead of intention? This isn't about judging yourself, it's about meeting yourself. Journaling is a powerful tool for this. Take time to write about moments when you felt triggered, jealous, angry, or small. Don't censor. Don't spiritualize it. Just tell the truth. Because the more you name your shadow in words, the less power it has in silence. Dreams are not just random images. Jung believed they are the language of the unconscious, the inner world trying to speak when the ego is asleep. If you've ever had a recurring dream, especially one that feels emotionally intense, symbolic, or mysterious, that's your unconscious sending a message. Maybe it's a faceless figure chasing you, a broken mirror, a locked room, a voice you can't find the source of. Whatever it is, start keeping a dream journal. Write down your dreams as soon as you wake up, even if they're fragmented. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns. And within those patterns, may be the very archetypes you'll encounter beyond this life. Better to meet them now while you can still grow from the meeting. Most of us are taught to push past pain, to smile through grief, to distract ourselves from discomfort, to drown fear with noise. But in Jungian psychology, every negative emotion is a doorway to deeper truth. Sadness may be your soul asking to slow down. Rage might point to a boundary being violated. Envy might reveal a dream you gave up on. Instead of resisting these emotions, dialogue with them. Try this the next time you feel overwhelmed by a difficult emotion. Sit down, close your eyes, and ask, "What are you trying to show me?" Then listen. That is the beginning of emotional integration. And when you can face your feelings now, you won't be shocked by them later when your ego is gone, and the unconscious becomes your only reality. Preparing for archetypal encounters is not a one-time thing, it's a lifelong rhythm. Set aside time each week to reflect inward. Light a candle. Sit in stillness. Journal. Meditate. Walk in nature without distraction. Ask your inner world to speak. This is not about perfection. It's about presence. These rituals create a sacred mirror where the unconscious can reveal itself safely. It softens the archetypes, makes them familiar, turns fear into relationship. Because the archetypes are not enemies. They are mirrors. At the core of all Jungian work is this: the self is not the ego. The ego is the part of you that navigates the outside world, roles, jobs, identities, image. But the self is deeper. It's the whole of you, your essence, your soul. You meet the self in silence, in shadow, in dreams, in moments of awe. Heartbreak, surrender. The more you connect to the self while alive, the more prepared you are to return to it in death. Because the afterlife, as Jung saw it, is not a judgment, it's a homecoming. And if your home is filled with rooms you've never entered, what might be waiting behind those doors? Here's a question to sit with. Have you ever had a recurring dream? One that wakes you with a strange, lingering feeling. Like you've just been warned, maybe it's not just a dream. Maybe it's your unconscious knocking, asking to be seen. Will you answer, "Let me share something that changed my life"? A few years ago, I kept dreaming of a dark stairwell. I was always walking down deeper and deeper, but I never reached the bottom. I'd wake up every time just before the final step. I thought it was just stress, until I began shadow work. I realized the stairwell was my subconscious mind, and what I feared at the bottom was myself. The truth I didn't want to see. And when I finally faced it, my buried guilt, my unresolved grief, the anger I inherited but never owned, the dream changed. I didn't wake up before the bottom anymore. I found a door, and behind it, there was light. That's what this work is about. Not escaping the dark, but walking through it until you find the light that was always there. So as we reach the end of this journey, remember, the afterlife isn't a mystery you'll solve with belief. It's a mirror that reflects what you've dared to face or refused to. And in our final section, we'll explore why meeting these archetypes isn't a curse, but the greatest opportunity your soul will ever have. Because what waits for you after death isn't punishment. It's possibility. So don't go anywhere. What's coming may change the way you see your life and your death. So what have we learned? The archetypes you'll meet after death, especially the shadow, aren't here to punish you. They're not monsters waiting to devour your soul. And they're certainly not divine judges sitting on some celestial throne. They are mirrors. Mirrors that reveal what you've carried in your soul all along. They show you what you've embraced and what you've denied. They reflect not just your choices, but your truths. Carl Jung didn't see death as an ending. He saw it as the moment your inner world becomes the only world that matters. And in that moment, the only question left is, will you recognize yourself or be terrified by your own reflection? But here's the beautiful part. You don't have to be afraid of that moment if you begin the journey now, if you start doing the work of integration today. Listening to your dreams, naming your shadows, sitting with uncomfortable emotions, honoring the symbols that rise from within. Then when that final breath comes, the archetypes won't feel like strangers. They'll feel like guides, like old companions showing you the doorway to your next evolution. Because the real fear isn't death. The real fear is meeting yourself unprepared. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever met your shadow in a dream, a vision, or in one of those overwhelming emotional moments that wouldn't let go? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this video spoke to something deep inside, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. We're just getting started exploring the mysteries of the soul, the unconscious, and the truth behind what waits beyond the veil. This isn't just a channel, it's a journey, and I'm grateful to be walking it with you.